The final trap. The Vorlek fleet drifted helplessly in the cold void of space, their engines barely functioning, their weapons running out of power, and their shields flickering like dying embers. They had fought bravely for weeks, resisting the unstoppable invasion of the Zorvax Empire. But now, they were trapped, surrounded by the enemy's warships, and there was no escape left. Every attempt to break through the blockade had failed. Every strategy had been countered. And now, the only thing that remained was waiting for the end. Commander Varric stood on the bridge of the last surviving battleship, his golden eyes fixed on the massive Zorvax dreadnought that loomed in the distance. It was a monstrous vessel, nearly the size of a small moon, covered in thick armor and bristling with weapons that could tear apart entire planets. Around it, hundreds of Zorvax cruisers and destroyers moved into position, forming an inescapable cage around the weakened Vorlak forces. The message from the enemy had been clear: surrender or be annihilated. A hush fell over the bridge as a transmission came through, the deep, rumbling voice of Warlord Corvos echoing through the ship's speakers. "Vorlak scum," he sneered, his reptilian features twisting into a cruel grin. "You fought well, but this is the end. There is no one coming to save you. No miracles, no reinforcements. Surrender your fleet, and I may grant you a swift death. Resist, and I will burn your worlds to the ground." Silence filled the command deck. The officers exchanged nervous glances, knowing that no matter what choice they made, death was inevitable. They could fight until the last ship was destroyed, or they could lower their weapons and accept their fate. Either way, the Vorlak civilization, once proud and strong, was at its final moment. Varric's fists tightened as he gazed at the holographic map, showing the enemy's overwhelming numbers. He had always known that the Zorvax were ruthless, but to see them toy with their prey, enjoying their slow destruction, filled him with rage. But anger wouldn't change reality. There was no way out. "Commander," one of his officers said, his voice trembling, "our long-range sensors, they're picking up something." Varric turned sharply, his mind immediately racing. "What is it?" The officer hesitated. "It's something large. Multiple contacts, approaching fast from outside the system." For a moment, hope flickered in Varric's heart, but he crushed it quickly. There were no allies left, no forces that could come to their rescue. The entire Vorlak fleet had already been destroyed or scattered across the stars. Whatever was coming, it wasn't one of theirs. "Identify them," Varric ordered, his voice steady. The officer's fingers moved swiftly over the control panel, sending out scanning waves, but the results that came back only deepened the confusion. "Unknown ships," the officer said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Designs do not match any known galactic faction." Varric frowned. That was impossible. Every species in the galaxy had their own unique technology, their own signatures that could be recognized instantly. If these ships were unknown, it meant only one thing: whoever they belonged to had never revealed themselves before. On the massive Zorvax flagship, Warlord Corvos also received the same sensor readings, and his reaction was immediate: laughter. "Another foolish fleet coming to die," he mocked, his jagged teeth flashing. "No matter. We will crush them just like we crushed the Vorlak." But as the new ships drew closer, something strange happened. The Zorvax scanners failed. The dreadnought's advanced targeting systems, which had never once malfunctioned, suddenly went dark. Their communications flickered with static, their encrypted signals jammed effortlessly. And then, out of the darkness, they saw them. The fleet that had arrived was nothing like the ships of the Vorlak, nothing like the warships of the Zorvax, and nothing like anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their black, angular hulls gleamed under the dying star's light, their design completely alien, yet terrifyingly precise. They moved in perfect, silent coordination, their engines barely making a sound, as if they were ghosts gliding through the void. Then the first transmission came through, not from the Vorlak, not from the Zorvax, but from the newcomers themselves. A single voice, calm yet firm, echoed through every ship in the system. "Stand down." And at that moment, the galaxy changed forever. Silence fell across the battlefield as the mysterious fleet advanced, their black, angular warships moving with a precision that sent a cold chill through every alien commander watching. The Zorvax Empire, known for its ruthless conquests, had never encountered anything like this before. Their scanners still failed to identify the ships, their advanced systems struggling to make sense of the incomprehensible technology that now surrounded them. Commander Varric, standing on the bridge of the last surviving Vorlak battleship, felt his heart pounding. The transmission had been clear, firm, and absolute. "Stand down." It wasn't a plea. It was a warning. But who were these newcomers? And why had they come now, at the very moment when all hope was lost? On the Zorvax flagship, Warlord Corvos sneered, his reptilian eyes narrowing. He would not be intimidated by some unknown force. He had conquered entire star systems, crushed civilizations that had existed for thousands of years, and no fleet, no matter how advanced, would change that. "Charge weapons," Corvos growled, his voice filled with arrogance. "If they stand in our way, we will annihilate them." The moment his words were spoken, the Zorvax fleet moved into attack formation. Thousands of turrets, plasma cannons, and railguns locked onto the approaching ships. Warlord Corvos grinned, expecting them to flee or surrender. But the black warships did not stop. They did not slow down. They did not respond. And then, they struck. The first Zorvax destroyer exploded without warning, its entire hull ripped apart in a single, precise blast. There had been no visible energy buildup, no missile trails, no sign of a traditional attack, just an instant kill. A second warship met the same fate, its shields failing in an instant, as if they were never there to begin with. A third tried to retreat, only to be sliced clean in half by a beam so fast that it looked like a flash of light. Panic erupted across the Zorvax fleet. Their mighty warships, the same ones that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, were being destroyed effortlessly. This is impossible," one of the Zorvax commanders stammered, his eyes wide in disbelief. "Their weapons, there." But his ship was the next to be erased from existence. For the first time in his life, Warlord Corvos felt fear. This was not a battle. This was a massacre. The Zorvax had expected a fight, but what they got was pure devastation. Their warships, designed to dominate lesser species, were nothing against this fleet. Commander Varric, watching the battle unfold, realized the truth before anyone else. The Vorlak had not been saved. The Zorvax had not been challenged. No, something far greater and more terrifying had happened. The true masters of war had arrived. The Zorvax Empire, for all its power and brutality, had just made the biggest mistake in the history of the galaxy. They had angered humanity, and humanity had just begun its war. The battlefield, once filled with the roaring sounds of war, had fallen into an unnatural silence. The Zorvax Empire's fleet, which had once been an unstoppable force, was now reduced to burning wreckage. Floating helplessly in space, what was left of their mighty armada hung in orbit around the dying Vorlak world, their once mighty warships now nothing more than twisted metal and drifting debris. Warlord Corvos, leader of the Zorvax forces, stood frozen on the bridge of his flagship. His scaled fists trembled, his once proud expression replaced with something he had never felt before: terror. This is impossible," he whispered, his voice barely audible. He had fought countless battles. He had crushed entire civilizations beneath the might of the Zorvax war machine. And yet, in mere minutes, these unknown warships had dismantled his fleet as if it were nothing. The black human warships still hovered in the void, their angular hulls absorbing the faint light of the distant sun. They were silent, unmoving, patient, as if they were waiting for something. A sharp chime rang through the Zorvax command deck, a sound that sent a cold chill through every officer still alive. It was an incoming transmission. from the mysterious fleet. The crew hesitated. No one moved. "Answer it." Corvos snarled, though his voice betrayed his fear. A screen flickered to life. At first, there was nothing but darkness. Then, a humanoid figure stepped forward, its face hidden beneath the shadows of a helmet. A human. "This is Admiral Ethan Carter of the Terran Defense Fleet." The figure spoke. His voice was calm, firm, and absolute, the voice of someone who had nothing to fear. "We have detected an unprovoked invasion against the Vorlak people. Your warships have been neutralized. You are outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. There will be no negotiations." Corvos clenched his jaw, his reptilian eyes burning with rage. "You think you can threaten me, human?" he growled. "I am Warlord Corvos of the Zorvax Empire. We have conquered thousands of worlds." "We?" The human admiral raised a hand, and suddenly, another Zorvax battleship exploded into a fireball of destruction, torn apart in an instant. The explosion's glow reflected in Corvos's wide, fearful eyes. Admiral Carter didn't even flinch. "This is not a threat," Carter said, his voice cold. "This is a statement of fact. The Zorvax Empire's reign of terror ends today." Silence filled the bridge. Corvos, for the first time in his life, had no response. The humans were not negotiating. They were giving orders. His empire, his fleet, everything he had built, it was nothing to these beings. Then Admiral Carter spoke again, his next words shattering the last remnants of Corvos's arrogance. "You have one choice, Warlord," Carter said. "Surrender, or be erased from existence." Corvos felt his knees weaken. The Zorvax Empire had never surrendered in its history. But as he looked at the black warships surrounding him, each one capable of destroying his fleet in seconds, he knew the truth. They had never fought a species like this before. And if they did not surrender, the Zorvax Empire would not exist by the end of the day. The silence on the Zorvax flagship was unbearable. Every officer, every warrior, every surviving crew member held their breath, waiting for Warlord Corvos to respond to the human admiral's cold ultimatum. The warrior race, which had spent centuries conquering the weak and crushing civilizations under their iron rule, now faced a decision they had never considered: surrender or die. Corvos' claws dug into the armrests of his command throne. His pride, his honor, his very identity as a warlord screamed at him to fight until the last ship burned. But his instinct for survival whispered something else. The black human warships, now motionless in the void, were watching, waiting. They did not need to fire another shot. They had already proven their power. He turned to his second-in-command, Captain Vrax. The younger Zorvax warrior's scaled face was pale, his reptilian eyes filled with something Corvos had never seen before: doubt. "They are bluffing," Corvos growled. "No species would be so bold as to challenge the Zorvax Empire like this. We have ruled the stars for centuries. We have. They just destroyed our entire fleet in minutes, Warlord." Captain Vrax interrupted, his voice shaking. "If we do not surrender, they will wipe us from existence." Corvos bared his fangs. His rage boiled over at the thought of bending the knee to these unknown creatures. But then, something unexpected happened. The human admiral's image flickered, and the screen shifted. The Zorvax officers gasped as they saw something truly horrifying: a live feed from another battlefield. It was Zorvax Prime, the capital world of their empire. And it was under attack. The image showed dozens of human warships, far larger than the ones currently in orbit over the Vorlak world, descending into Zorvax space. The planet's defensive fleets, once thought to be the greatest force in the galaxy, were being torn apart like paper. One by one, Zorvax battleships exploded into fireballs, their legendary shields doing nothing against the advanced weaponry of the humans. Ground-based defenses tried to fight back, but orbital strikes from human dreadnoughts reduced entire military installations to rubble in seconds. And then, the worst part, dropships. The humans were landing. Troop carriers descended through the clouds, escorted by sleek black fighter squadrons. They moved without hesitation, with deadly precision, cutting down any resistance that stood in their way. For the first time in its history, Zorvax Prime was being invaded. The unstoppable conquerors were now the ones being conquered. Corvos felt his breath hitch in his throat. This wasn't a battle. This was annihilation. The human admiral's voice returned, calm and cold as ever. "We do not bluff," Admiral Carter said. "The Zorvax Empire has 2 minutes to surrender. If you do not, your empire will be nothing more than a footnote in history." Corvos clenched his fists. His empire, his warriors, his legacy, all crumbling before his eyes. Pride and fear warred within him. But deep down he knew this was not a battle they could win. The Zorvax Empire, which had never known true fear, now understood what it felt like to face a superior enemy. And that enemy was humanity. A heavy silence filled the bridge of the Zorvax flagship. Every officer, every warrior, every surviving crew member held their breath, staring at Warlord Corvos. The greatest warlord of the Zorvax Empire was now faced with a choice no Zorvax had ever made before: surrender or die. On the screen before them, the horrifying reality of the battle over Zorvax Prime continued to unfold. Human warships moved with deadly precision, their advanced weaponry tearing through defenses that had stood unshaken for centuries. On the ground, Zorvax warriors, the elite of their empire, fought with desperate fury, but it was a losing battle. Human drop pods rained from the sky, bringing heavily armed soldiers who moved like ghosts through the battlefield, outmaneuvering, outgunning, and outmatching the once mighty Zorvax legions. And then, a chilling sight: the Imperial Palace, the heart of the Empire, the seat of Zorvax rule, burning. For the first time in his life, Corvos felt powerless. The Zorvax had always believed themselves to be the apex predators of the galaxy, the rulers of war, the conquerors of countless civilizations. But today, they were learning a terrible truth. They were not the strongest. They were not invincible. They were not the ones in control. A deep growl rumbled from Corvos's throat. His clawed fingers tightened around the armrests of his command throne, his body trembling, not with rage, but with realization. Humanity had done something unthinkable. They had beaten the Zorvax at their own game. "Warlord," Captain Vrax whispered, his voice breaking. "It's over. If we continue to fight, our entire species will be wiped out." Corvos turned toward his second-in-command, eyes burning. The younger warrior flinched, but did not look away. There was no defiance in his gaze, only fear and acceptance. A message appeared on the screen. The human admiral was waiting for an answer. Admiral Carter's voice came through the comms, cold and sharp as a blade. "Final warning. Zorvax, surrender, or we erase you from history." Corvos closed his eyes. Surrender. The word itself felt like poison. No Zorvax had ever surrendered in battle. Their honor, their code, their very existence was built on the idea that they would rather die than kneel. But today, honor meant nothing. Because there would be no Zorvax left to honor if this war continued. His voice, when he finally spoke, was not the voice of a warlord. It was the voice of a defeated leader. "We surrender." The words echoed across the bridge. Officers stared in stunned silence. Some lowered their heads, their pride shattered. Others collapsed into their seats, as if their strength had left them completely. Corvos pressed a button on his console. His voice carried across all remaining Zorvax fleets, across every last stronghold, across the remnants of an empire that had once stood unchallenged. "This is Warlord Corvos," he said, his voice heavy with grief. "All Zorvax forces, stand down. Ceasefire. We have lost." The moment the words left his mouth, it was over. On the human warships, officers exchanged looks of victory. On the ground, human soldiers paused, watching as Zorvax warriors dropped their weapons, their heads lowered in defeat. Admiral Carter's voice came through one last time. "Wise choice, warlord." And then the human fleet moved forward, not as conquerors, but as judges. The Zorvax Empire had fallen. But what would come next? Would humanity show mercy? Or was this only the beginning of their rule? A heavy silence filled the void of space. The once mighty Zorvax fleet, now powerless, drifted in orbit above their burning homeworld. Their warships, once symbols of terror and dominance, stood still, weapons powered down, shields disabled, waiting for whatever came next. On the bridge of the human flagship UH Titan, Admiral Carter sat in his command chair, eyes locked on the massive holographic display before him. The Zorvax had surrendered. But now came the real question. What would humanity do next? The bridge was filled with tension. Officers worked in silence, their screens displaying the surrender confirmations from every surviving Zorvax vessel. Across the Zorvax homeworld, human ground forces moved cautiously, securing critical locations, ensuring that the surrender was real and not a trap. Captain Reynolds, Carter's second-in-command, broke the silence. "Sir, the galaxy is watching." Carter exhaled slowly. He knew what was at stake. The Zorvax were not just any enemy. They were the most feared empire in the known galaxy. For centuries, they had ruled through blood and conquest, crushing any civilization that dared resist them. Humanity had changed everything. But now, with the war won, the power was in their hands. The UH Titan received an incoming transmission from Warlord Corvos himself. The defeated leader stood in the center of his ruined command deck, his armor battered, his expression grim. Carter accepted the transmission. Corvos stared at him. "This is the first time in Zorvax history that we have surrendered," the warlord said. His voice, though deep and firm, carried a weight of defeat. "Never have we kneeled before another species. And yet, here we are." Carter remained silent, waiting. Corvos took a slow breath before speaking again. "Your people have every reason to destroy us completely. We have committed atrocities. We have burned worlds. We have enslaved and slaughtered without mercy. If our positions were reversed, we would not hesitate to wipe you from existence." The warlord's piercing eyes met Carter's. "Will you do the same?" The bridge of the UH Titan was silent. Every human officer, every soldier listening in, held their breath. Carter leaned forward, his voice calm but unshakable. "You're right," he said. "If the roles were reversed, humanity wouldn't even get the chance to surrender. You'd wipe us out, just as you've done to countless others." Corvos nodded grimly. "Then what is your answer?" For a moment, Carter said nothing. Then, with a slow breath, he gave the command. "All ships, stand down. Begin humanitarian aid for the civilian population." Corvos' eyes widened in shock. He was expecting annihilation. He had prepared for it. Instead, the humans were offering mercy. Carter's voice remained firm. "Your people are beaten. Your empire is finished. But humanity is not like you. We don't conquer for the sake of power. We don't destroy just because we can." He leaned closer, his gaze like steel. "We don't rule through fear, but we will make sure you never threaten anyone again." Corvos couldn't speak. The weight of history had shifted in an instant. The humans, the same species the Zorvax had once mocked as weak and insignificant, were proving to be something far greater. Not just warriors, not just conquerors, but something more dangerous. A species that knew when to fight and when to show mercy. As Carter ended the transmission, he turned to his crew. "The war is over," he said, "but we just changed the balance of the galaxy forever. Because now, every empire, every species, every warlord who once believed humanity was weak would learn to fear them and respect them. For in the moment of their greatest victory, humanity had proven why they were truly unstoppable." The silence across the battlefield was deafening. The mighty Zorvax Empire, which had ruled the galaxy with an iron grip for centuries, now stood defeated, its warships powerless, its leaders humbled, and its people facing an uncertain future. Humanity had won, but the true test was just beginning. Across the galaxy, thousands of species watched the events unfold, their leaders holding emergency meetings, their militaries questioning what this meant for the balance of power. Humanity was no longer an unknown race from the edges of space. They were now the most powerful force the galaxy had ever seen. On the bridge of the UH Titan, Admiral Carter stood before a holographic display of the Zorvax homeworld. Fires still burned across the planet's surface, remnants of the brutal battle that had raged just hours before. The once invincible Zorvax fleet, now scattered and broken, was surrounded by the warships of the United Human Systems, their weapons locked but silent. The war was over, and now came the choice that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. Reports came flooding in. Human troops had secured the capital, medical teams were tending to the wounded, and supply ships were moving in to deliver food and aid to the civilians caught in the chaos. It was not an act of mercy. It was a statement. Humanity had won, but they were not conquerors. They were something the galaxy had never seen before, a force that fought with unstoppable power, but chose not to rule through fear. The Zorvax warlords, once arrogant and ruthless, were now prisoners. Warlord Corvos, the last true leader of the Empire, stood aboard the Titan, shackled but unbroken, his gaze locked on Admiral Carter. There was no hatred in his eyes, only disbelief. "You had the power to destroy us completely," Corvos said, his voice low. "Why didn't you?" Carter met his gaze without hesitation. "Because we are not like you." Corvos studied him, his mind racing through possibilities. The Zorvax had always ruled through domination, through fear, through the knowledge that no enemy would dare challenge them. And yet, when they finally met an enemy stronger than them, that enemy had chosen not to crush them. It was something he could not understand. "Your people will fear you now," Corvos muttered. "Not just mine. All of them. Every species watching this moment will see your warships and wonder when their time will come." Carter's expression did not change. "Let them wonder." The transmission of the Zorvax surrender was broadcast across every corner of the galaxy. Empires that had once cowered before the Zorvax now saw a new power standing in its place. Some would see humanity as liberators. Others would see them as a threat even greater than the one they had just defeated. The old balance was gone, and in its place, something new had begun. As the Titan's crew continued their work, Carter turned to Captain Reynolds. "Send a message to the High Council. Inform them that the war is over, but our mission isn't. The galaxy is about to change, and we need to be ready for what comes next." Reynolds nodded, understanding the weight of those words. The battle was over, but the true war had just begun. Somewhere out there, new enemies were already planning, new alliances were being formed, and those who once feared the Zorvax were now watching humanity with the same fear in their hearts. But Carter was not afraid. He knew what humanity was capable of. They were not invincible, but they were unstoppable. And whatever came next, whatever the galaxy threw at them, they would be ready. Because today, humanity had proven a truth that could never be forgotten. They were no longer the ones fearing the darkness. Now, they were the ones the darkness feared.